Hi, and welcome back. Today, I want to talk about one of my favorite forms of therapy, and this one is called acceptance and commitment therapy. I use a lot of these ideas and understandings of humanity in my practice regularly. And I just thought that having a video on kind of the stages of just an understanding of what this theory slash therapy can offer can have people a little bit more willing to engage with other theories other than like cognitive behavioral therapy if that doesn't fit for some. Although I will tell you, acceptance and commitment therapy is very, very, very closely linked to cognitive behavioral therapy in many ways. It's just acceptance and commitment therapy looks a lot more at how we relate to cognitions, behaviors, the world around us, rather than trying to manipulate um, and kind of change the cognitions. Um, Full disclosure though, in my practice, I kind of merge both topics together to try to create one nice integrated way of seeing the world. Anyway, that being said, all today we're going to be talking about is psychopathology. That just is a fancy word for creation. When did symptoms start? How did they start? That's what we're going to talk about today. So, first things first, I kind of did a little bit of this, but what is acceptance and commitment therapy? Um, it has really, really high effectiveness, which means it worked really well for pain management. And so, pain management, basically chronic pain symptoms, even like irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, anything that gives us a negative response from our body, this can work really well with. It doesn't fix anything, right? However, it can help us understand and have a different relationship with our physical pain, which will actually lower the pain felt experience over time. So it's pretty cool. But the goal isn't actually to fix or solve any symptoms, although they do go down as we practice this type of thinking. Okay, it is quite effective for depression, anxiety, schizo-related disorders, OCD, things like that. Not a lot of research out there yet on like bipolar. Um, it's happening. We just don't know the results of that type of research just yet. And so the basic theory is that people have learned different ways of thinking from all of our past experiences in our life. And those experiences teach us a lot of things, healthy and unhealthy. And when we're kids, especially, we learn how to cope with the world in usually helpful ways at the time. But if we use those same ways as an adult, it might create some issues. Um, Here's a couple of examples that I have on the slide here. Um, this is a really good one in today's society. A lot of men, middle-aged men usually, today, were taught when they were growing up just to get over their emotions, right? They start crying. What do the parents say? You know, pick yourself up off your bootstraps, whatever, right? This this only helps in that exact moment because the kid stops crying because they got shamed out of having an emotional reaction, right? And so they just stop. And so the parents are like, haha, we did a good job. And, you know, to some extent they did. However, it's what the kid learns through that experience. And many men in particular were taught that, well, I can't have emotion now, right? And that creates a whole host of problems, right? Some people, and this doesn't just include men, but other people even learn that having an emotion is so bad that I don't even know what an emotion is. You know, you might be able to ask and talk to somebody who is so low on that emotional intelligence scale because of society telling us that it's bad to have emotion, right? It's a crazy, crazy thing that we learn. Anyway, um, well, now a lot of people, if they're told to get over it, in this example, men, well, they still have emotion, right? And so they've learned that they have to distract through all of these experiences, right? And so we see a lot of rates of like alcoholism or drug use, right? Or we see dysregulation problems. This says upregulation. That means dysregulation. Um, where they might have huge rage issues because they don't know what emotions are. How could they, right? This is a very compassionate approach, right? Back then, we learned not to have emotion. How are we supposed to know what emotions are today and how to handle them? Right? It makes sense. At least I hope it does. Another example, right? Trigger warning, right? Somebody who was raped believing that it was all their fault, which is very common in these types of situations. And now they're wandering through life and they have like insane low self-confidence, self-esteem, self-image because it's like, oh my goodness, it's my fault and how could this happen to me and oh, I shouldn't have done this and right, it goes on and on. Right? And they also have a lot of anxiety responses. How could they trust the world around them if the world around them hurt them? Right? And this might relate to you, it might not relate to you, right? But it's understanding that it's a way, we've learned ways of thinking from our previous experiences in life, right? At the time, they might be healthy, right? This get over it example could be pretty healthy in that exact moment, right? Adulthood, not so much. Okay, psychopathology, creation of symptoms. Brief and to the point, right? Issues from learning what we just talked about in those previous, usually childhood times, from those pasts is not, okay, related to feeling the emotions from such events. So, two separate phenomena happen in our brain. We have the felt experience of the moment, and then we have a narrative. We have an understanding through thought on what our experience was. How do we know we have a narrative? Because we can tell the story, right? We have a language to understand ourselves in the moment that any of these events happened. Okay? So, it is critical to know that everybody has their emotional responses, and that is okay. It is natural for when a loved one dies to have grief, and that grief can go on literally forever, and that's okay because the felt experience is there. Right? Basically, if you're having an emotion, it's completely understandable why you're having that emotion. Okay? That needs to be remembered. Now, pathology issues, right, occur from when that tendency to avoid pain, right, that's built within all of us, right? We touch the hot stove, we jerk away from it without having to think, oh, do I need to jerk away from it, right? Right? We avoid pain so much that avoidance becomes too integrated. It becomes way too ingrained in our current behaviors. And now that avoidance is creating secondary problems, right? So here's an understanding of the brain. Brief and to the point, I'll maybe go more into this in another video. But neurogenesis, basically how the brain grows and develops, okay? So what wires together, fires together. I have some examples on here. Bike riding. Many of us, right, have had the privilege of access to a bike at a very young age, right? I don't know if any of us can truly remember those experiences. However, I'm sure we got on the bike, we fell off. We got on, we fell off, we got on, and soon we didn't fall off as much, right? What ended up happening was through constant repetition and attempts at a behavior, the brain slowly wired itself to incorporate every single muscle and balance system in order to stay stationary and moving on a bike. Like that is an incredible source of ingenuity of the brain right there, right? Another one. You see, I move my hands all the time, right? But I'm going to let you know right now, I'm not thinking while these hands are moving. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to move my hand this way, and now I'm going to close my fist over here. No. Right? That's not going through my mind. Why? Because the talking area of my brain and the hand moving part of my brain, right, ended up at some point in my life being connected together, right? I learned that, hey, if I move my hands, I can get my point across more effectively, or maybe I can hold attention more, or maybe. Whatever the case is, right, my brain learned that when my hands move while my talking is happening, right, it is more effective. And so it has created a direct link between those areas of the brain. So as soon as I start talking, that area lights up, which automatically triggers a whole network to activate, which includes my hands moving, right? It just does it. Why? Because it was repetitively ingrained in my brain. That's why, right? So that's really important, right? For when we look at, hey, when we learn from things from the past about ourselves, things start to go wrong. Okay, example. It's important to distract from pain. It is, right? However, let's see. The issue is that we have learned that we need to distract from all pain, all of it, right? And that is simply incorrect. That is simply incorrect, right? There's a happiness trap. It's a good book out there. I would recommend. And it talks about how we all have these experiences that do not include happy, right? Happy is this much of a whole pie of emotion, right? We do not need to be happy at all times. No. And when we try to be happy at all times, it actually creates more pain and suffering, right? That's what happens. So, here's an example, right? Someone who is scared of evaluation at work is going to avoid advocating for themselves, right? If we're afraid of somebody evaluating us, we're going to be as silent and as tiny as possible. And we're not going to speak up and be seen, right? That doesn't make any sense when we look at the emotion, right? However, it's going to continue a cycle of misery because they are continuing to avoid the possibility of embarrassment by not advocating for the changes that they want within their work experience. Right? So we just have this constant cycle until the person changes, until we either get a new job, until we start advocating for the self, right? The cycle will continue, right? Another example, parents out there. It's so nervous having a kiddo. It is like a constant low-grade anxiety about their safety and well-being at all times, right? However, when a parent is so nervous about the kiddo's well-being, they're going to do everything to control the child's behaviors, right? It can get to that extreme point, right? By whatever means possible, right? Sometimes parents are going to increase the amount of consequences out there, right? Well, if you're not going to get good grades, well, I'm going to ground you and do da 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 da, and I'm going to take away all your responsibility or all of your privileges, right? Okay, that can be helpful. It is a behavior change tactic, right? And that is probably on the lighter end in comparison to much, much harsher and inappropriate ways of parenting. Right? I don't even need to name those. I'm sure your imagination's got it, right? But when we start to control the environment so much, it can have very damaging implications on the kiddo's development, right? Now, what I'm saying with these examples here, this isn't universal, right? People will create their own narrative based on their own life experiences, okay? So a kid can, from a very controlled parent, can learn that they're just not good enough, right? Every time I, as a kid, right, try to do something, well, my parents are controlling everything that I do. So I obviously can't do it. That's proof, right? Or, right, I just can't make any choices for myself, right? I have to be codependent on another person, right? You make the choices, you make the choices because I was taught that I can't, right? Now, again, two examples, right? Another one might be when kids are like, wow, screw this, and they're going to rebel, which actually does the exact opposite of what the parents want them to do, which actually increases the probability of the kids getting hurt in the end, right? Counterintuitive. This is really important because this happens so often. When we try to avoid or prevent an outcome so hard, we can actually create the outcome that we're trying to prevent, right? If I am so nervous, right, if I'm obsessed that my phone is going to die and I might need it for an emergency, I'm going to have it plugged in all the time. Well, what do we know about phones that are always plugged in? It's going to slowly erode the battery, right? And all of a sudden it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy that, hey, my phone, look it, I should have had this plugged in because now it's only at 20% and it's only been unplugged for an hour, right? We create our own issues. Okay. Therefore, if we learn from the past, how is this present today? Because this is helpful for self-compassion. Self-compassion is so critical to healing any situation, right? Because if I have a major anger outburst at somebody that I love, right, and which obviously isn't within my value system, right? I wouldn't want to do that, right? If I can have an understanding of myself and say, hey, look, that anger outburst is completely inappropriate and not aligned with who I want to be. And I recognize that that anger outburst has many, many, many reasons why I am naturally behaving that way. Now, that's not to be used as an excuse. Okay? Compassion is compassion when there's a behavior afterwards. Right? If I just said, well, I can yell all I want because my childhood was really, really, really crappy. Right? That is an excuse. Right? Compassion is, hey, my childhood was really, really, really crappy. I have no concept of what emotions are. I don't know how to regulate with them because of that childhood. And I am working and using steps that I've been learning to help me not have as many of those enraged behavioral moments. Right? That's compassion. Right? So it's very important on how we got to where we are today. Now, the next phase for creating mood disorders is one word: fusion. Now, fusion to what? Fusion to your thoughts. Okay? This is where it gets tricky. This is where philosophy is coming in, and it's kind of hard to categorize, okay? Believe it or not, we can talk ourselves into absolutely anything. Look at the news. People are doing very, very, very dangerous, harmful behaviors out there. They're doing the behaviors, which proves that humans can talk ourselves into anything. Well, not me, not me. Okay. How many times have we had a thought that was quite antisocial, which doesn't mean avoiding social situations, it means going against society norms, right? So people that are in prison correctly, incarcerated correctly, um, their behaviors would be considered antisocial. So there's a little PSA there for you. But we've had thoughts like that, right? Again, going to the parent, like, the 90th day in a row, and you're not sleeping so well because the kiddo keeps waking up and waking up and waking up, right? It's part of the parenthood, right? And there's one thought that's like, oh my God, I could just. One thought. That's all it takes. We've all had the thought. We can talk ourselves into anything. Now, thankfully, the majority of humans have enough regulation to not follow through with every single thought that goes up here. Okay? That's good, because that's building on what heals us in acceptance and commitment therapy language. Okay? So, mood disorders are created by constant understandings that what goes through your mind is what you actually believe. Okay? This gets tricky. Okay? What you believe is great. We want to empower what you believe if and only if it is within your value systems. Okay? So, somebody comes in the office, says, hey, I am very religious. And I go, that's fantastic. Right? It's a belief and it's within their value systems equals good. Right? Now, if somebody is coming in and saying, I'm going to church because I'm so shameful if I don't go to church that everybody's going to ostracize me and I really don't want to go to church. Right? Well, now, right, this doesn't feel like going to church is within the value system. I'm not making any statement here. Don't read into anything. I'm just giving two examples. Right? And so we want to go with what is important to you. And what is important to you in psychology is what we label values. Right? A lot of people, trust me, you might be experiencing this right now. A lot of people say, I don't have any values. I promise you do. We just have to find them. Okay? We can get there. I know we can. Now, that's the healing process, is finding values. Okay? So I'm going to put that off till later. So, fusion of the words that go through your mind. Right? If you can see evidence that everything that goes through here is not what you believe at all times, right? Look at New Year's resolutions, right? I have an example on here. What happens, right? First of the year, we're like, I'm going to exercise 30 minutes a day, 7 days a week, and I'm going to be healthy. Woo! Okay, good. Good. And I say good because it's within your health conscious identity. That's the only reason why I say good, right? You can have whatever values you want, but that is mine. So, what happens a few months in? Right? We might not be exercising that much anymore, right? Or maybe we didn't work up to the goal that what we wanted, and maybe we might have quit. What happens? The first of the year, we're like, I can do this. This is my goal. This is what I want. That's the words that are happening in our mind, right? What happens a few months afterwards? Well, I guess I didn't really want to do it, or I might not be built for that, or, exercising, it just takes too much time, or, you see what's happening here? The words that go through our mind shift, and all of a sudden we believe both identities. We can't believe both. Both I want to work out and I don't want to work out cannot exist in the same time. It cannot. Right? And so do you see how the fusion to the thoughts that we have, I want to exercise, fuse to that, which means I want to do it. I don't want to exercise, fuse to that, which means I don't want to do it. We can't have those at the same exact time. So who am I? Right? The who am I is such an important question because boom, we go right back to values. Right? But the issue is that we create too much focus on what goes through here and the importance of what goes through there. Okay? All right. Confusing. Yes. I'm going to talk more about acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, in future videos. I'm going to talk about, right, how do we heal through this process, which here you heard me throughout today saying compassion and value different behaviors. I'll go more into that, okay? Now, if you want more individualized understanding of this, how this relates to you, give me a call, right? I'll leave my information down below and we'll have a chat, okay? All right, but you have to be in Wisconsin or Minnesota because of those fun licensing rules. So hopefully you can use some of this information. Don't take anything out of context. And I will see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.